guys, I'm so excited to be with you. I have a tradition when I do this. When I was a part of this as a student, there was, I can't remember his name, but there was a gentleman who presented, and it was memorable. Everything he talked about was good. And he also, for every question, he gave away a book, his favorite book. So I bring some of my favorite books. I'm going to save those for when we go afterwards upstairs, but I also I'm involved with Stance socks, if any of you know Stance socks. So I grabbed a bunch off of my Stance rack, and I have some Stance socks. So if you ask a question as we're going along, my son, Sid Jr., will run up and hand off a pair of socks. A couple stories I want to start with. And the title was, as I thought through and kind of looked through the slides, this was the theme, and it was kind of the top of mind feeling too of everything I want to share with you. There's just, it's hard to perfectly capture your journey through startup, and I have a little bit of perspective now on the venture side in backing entrepreneurs, which I think helps me not just write kind of this revisionist history of my own experience, which you always make a little prettier or harder and curate, but hopefully I can distill some points that are useful to you. And this thought of conviction over consensus, it plays out over and over in both how I went about startup. Plenty of failures. I had 2 failed startups and 2 that worked out. It also, I see it again and again in how we think of backing entrepreneurs. If any of you attended Silicon Slope Summit, the winner of that was awarded a $250,000 investment, and then we made some personal investments too, Josh James and I there. And I don't think most people would have guessed the company we invested in there as the one that would have kind of won. But we think of conviction as trumping consensus in what we do. 2 stories to kick this off. One, just yesterday I was with one of my good friends. We were freshmen at the U together, and he's starting a business in Ogden. Is anybody from Ogden by chance? Do you know Javier's restaurant? So Javier Jr., Javier Cito, is a good friend of mine. We were together at the U, and he's starting his own company now. When I went on my mission, he would write me. He went on his pilgrimage. He's Catholic. I would write him. And every time we meet up, he starts the conversation by saying, are you still true to the faith? And I'll kind of ask him the same thing. And I appreciate that. And so first of all, and I'll describe this picture in a minute. Actually, I'll describe it now, and then I'll jump to that. So this is, we went with some good friends to Maui recently, and if you're going whale watching, who's been whale watching? So you know that sometimes it's a wait. You know, if you hit the right time in February, it could be perfect where you just start seeing them breaching and it's exciting. Maybe it's like a pack. Maybe it's you see some of the babies. Sometimes you're waiting for a while. And you kind of wonder when you're waiting, are we really going to see anything? And you start questioning the path you're on and looking at boats in the distance, and maybe they're seeing them. But what you find out typically, what we always find out, and the kids get excited for, is that there are in fact whales beneath. There's 3 points I want to make as I get going. First of all, we have a shared faith, most of us, and if we don't, then you're here and you understand, the common faith shared by many of us. Stay in the boat. Stay in the boat. You start here when it's simple and humble, and you're challenged, and you're on your knees a lot for school and relationships, and sometimes as life changes and evolves, it certainly gets more complex. You certainly get, in some ways, maybe more sophisticated, though that doesn't always equate to smarts. But sometimes we just think that leaving the boat is better. And this isn't, I've thought about saying this and how I'd say it, but I appreciate that I have a friend not of my faith who asks me essentially, are you staying in the boat? And I find that especially in my line of work, where success is what everybody's going after, and it's in a dramatic way. Starting a startup, there's greater chance that you're going to fail than succeed. When you do succeed, it pays off well, typically, right? There's a 50-50 chance that somehow we abandon things that we held sacred when we hit some of that success. So I am far from perfect. If anybody sees me play pickleball at the Provo Rec, my language would sometimes tell you I'm not Mormon. I do my best. My son can attest to it. I'm working on it. But I'm staying in this boat, and I hope you think about, hard about staying in this boat. That's important to me, and I want to make that point first. Second of all, staying in the boat. I also can appreciate, especially working with founders, and I'm assuming if you're coming here that you have some level of interest in either starting a business or maybe being a part of an early stage startup. What we've seen coincide with that is other challenges. You know, we have the physical challenges that are before our eyes, and we have a lot of the challenges of the soul and mind that we don't see, and it's real. And especially at a competitive university, there's down days. This is a time of year. Part of why we go to Maui is because I have seasonal depression. I need to get some vitamin D. I was just in Tucson, Arizona, and I'm eyeing, you know, a place in Mexico because I need to get some vitamin D. Didn't always have that luxury of being able to go where I want. What I can say is, as you have hard times, and regardless of this, certainly if it's part of startup, if it's just part of your schooling, hang in there. Stay in the boat, you know. Again, there is something special awaiting, and sometimes you just got to hang on for dear life. As it relates to startup, it's certainly the case that, and I would say that the single common factor amongst successful companies we back is just those that could stick it out the longest. By definition, like you can either say you run out of money, or you could say you just ran out of time. Or sometimes the two go hand in hand. Startup sometimes is about just hanging on to that rope. You might be dangling off the side of the boat. You might be bored in the middle of the boat. You might have not sure exactly where your place is on the boat anymore as your company grows, but sticking in there and just being able to hang out a bit longer sometimes is all you've got to do. Now, I'm going to dive into that a little bit deeper with the points I want to make. What I want to do is take you through my experience through startup, and I'm going to weave in some stories, vignettes from the companies that I've been fortunate to back and be a part of with Peak Ventures. So first of all, you're all in school right now. I was in the same spot. Staying the course, I think, is important. I'm not using this metaphorically. I'm like talking about like in school and as you're just plodding along on this more linear path in your life, which education is certainly linear. Like we all progress from when we were kids to now just by year. It's sort of strange, regardless of how, unless you skipped a grade, regardless of how bright or slow you are, we all progress linearly. I believe the reason you stay the course is precisely to put you in a position, the longer I'm at this, so that when the time is right, whether your personal circumstance or an exciting opportunity, you can jump and go for it. So let me share with you mine. I was in whatever the prerequisite econ class is for the business track. What is that? Econ 110. And I took it in the summer because I knew it would be like sped up, and I was like, I just want to, it was like rip off the Band-Aid, just get this done, is my recollection. So I'm in this class, and I'm rooming with somebody I served my mission with, Brad, and he's sharing with me this idea that he has, and I can't get it out of my mind. And I'm in the econ class, it's a little dry that day, and it's like I can't keep, it's just bouncing all around, so I just pull out a piece of paper and I just start writing down my thoughts, and then I realize I can tell I'm not, the teacher can probably tell I'm not the professor too engaged, so I step out, I just walk out, I finish writing this 2-page letter to who would become my business partner, to my buddy. And that was it for me. And we left school. We dropped out of school for a time. I did come back. I was newly married, and I promised my in-laws I would get a degree. So eventually we came back. But that's how I started my first startup. It was somewhat by chance. I'm not the person who grew up as a 7-year-old and was starting companies. I had a paper route. I worked really hard. I was raised by my mom. We were kind of middle class, lower middle class. And when I was a kid, it was like be a doctor or be a lawyer. And that's what I thought I was going to do. I just happened to major in business because somebody advised that it might be set me apart from all the biology majors. But I was on the pre-med path, and it was this experience here on campus where I just felt like I was kind of compelled. I was like, I put the pen to paper and I just couldn't stop writing. And we took off. That's how it began. That would lead to then, so this is my buddy Brad, that would lead to his brother. So in the midst of our second, we were continuing our first, and we were starting our second business, we met up with Mick. Mick was at Princeton at the time. And as he's at Princeton, he's sharing with us this cool idea, which would become kind of the most, the latest thing. And let me get into it this way. So we embarked on something that we all felt a shared passion for. We had experienced, and I'll explain the picture in a minute, we had experienced ourselves the challenge of applying to college. The fact that this was the beginnings of Facebook, I'm dating myself, but Facebook was just starting out. We found that it was strange that we were going through this massive application, high stress, high-stakes process of applying to a university. Meanwhile, we could connect with other humans more easily than ever before. It was like you could quickly figure out what they were interested in, maybe if there was some compatibility or shared interest, and you could start having like conversations and things. And so we thought that that was just strange, and we thought, might there be a better way for students and universities to connect? And this was the beginning of what we were doing. What I've found in that and in other startups and in backing startups now is I don't care how big or small. Sometimes it's like, is that $1 billion idea? And I try not to ever say that. We do look at the markets now. I look at the markets that we invest in. We sort of say, will this get big? But early on, it's, is this something that the founder kind of gets out of their seat for and gets really passionate about and has some kind of mission ingrained in it? This idea of conviction, I find, goes beyond just the founders. So these are two of our early teammates. This is Lance and this is Josh. And we had an office at the corner of University and Center in Provo. And we moved to a slightly larger, we added to our office space. We were hiring some people now. And there was this sought after corner office. Or maybe it was just an office that had a window. Really simple. And so they say, hey, I want it. And the other guy's like, I want it. And they go, well, let's arm wrestle for it. And so they get on the ground, and they're just going at it. And I'm in another room, and I hear this pop. And we go, and we're like, what happened? And Lance is sitting there, and he's like, I don't know. But then he gets up, and he can't move his arm. And he broke his bicep spirally, his arm. And I thought, like, since then, and he has a gnarly scar now, and he can't quite throw a football, so we tease him. But I thought, if we could only and that's for an office space, right? It strikes me as interesting that, we're in the wake of the Super Bowl. We have basketball. I love BYU hoops. Even though I played at the U, and they play each other, I just wear gray. I'm neutral. We can get out of our seats for so many things that are trivial. I mean, I think about this with my son with basketball. I'm like, it's like a piece of leather, and I played it. I love it, but we have a weird set of rules that sometimes change, and we get so into this. And I'm at this stage now where I have other parents, and we're like getting upset with each other about our kids. And it's amazing how many things we can get out of our seat for. If you're going after startup, it better be something that's beyond making a buck or one day making a lot of money, and it better be something that you feel viscerally. I met with one of the early investors in Snapchat, and here's what he shared with me. I love it. He said, when we first met with the founders of Snap, these are like the earliest investors. They came into our office, and when they were talking about Facebook, they talked about it with just pure disdain. It was like Facebook is robbing us of our 20s. And not just because they wanted to put inappropriate things on the web, because sometimes there's aspects of your life you're like, look, I'm not doing anything horrible on the weekend, but I don't know if I want it living on in the ether forever. And he described it as they felt a visceral, something visceral toward what they were doing, both the incumbent in Facebook and what they were building in Snap. And I love that. I love that kind of imagery in thinking about how you're going, what you're going after. So whether it's big or small, feel it in your bones. I see this in the companies we back. This is a company, a friend of mine, he was part of our last venture. He coined this phrase that a lot of companies are using now, which is talent exists globally and is evenly proportioned among geography, race, ethnicity, all of it. But opportunity is not. And it kind of makes sense. Some of us have lived in parts of the world or seen things that are just different. We are very privileged to just kind of be where we are and how we are right now. So we sort of get that. So he built a company where he said, what is the most sought after right now skill that is just a shortage of everywhere? What is that? Coding, yeah. And where are there huge, and he got very specific, where are there huge populations in nearby time zones that we could, attack to solve that disparity, to solve some of this problem and need for coding. And they looked to Africa. And so they launched in Lagos. We've launched since in several other geographies in Africa, and it's booming. We just raised, so we were one of the first, the first group to raise from the Chan Zuckerberg initiative, and then most recently raised another round, a $100 million round. And Andela has something. When you talk to them, you see a huge portion of their team. And they do these things where they take team to Africa, they bring their African team here. it's something that just goes so beyond a great business, though it is a fabulous business. This is something that the employees, beginning with the two founders, just feel deep in their bones. The next thing is this. So we're pursuing this opportunity. It's something that me and Brad and Mick feel personally. My father came here by boat, so education was a big deal. My mother's family's from Mexico, and my grandfather, had to drop out of school after the 2nd grade to help provide for the family, and so education was a big deal. And they would say the same thing. Their mother's from Guatemala, and we kind of felt this problem in education and connecting it to would-be college students. And then we found that we were just constrained, our team, and this is always the case. I believe more and more, the longer I'm at it, that founders have a level of crazy, and it's a level of crazy that we look for, actually. It's something that not only do they feel something in their bones, but they're crazy enough to think they can build and do something that either doesn't exist in this world or they can do it better than anybody else in the world. That just seems a little crazy. What you quickly find is that executing on your opportunity, you're handicapped, with just the founders, and that founding team, those early employees, are so critical. Here's what I think. Everybody in this picture I met while I was still in college. Every critical team member to my last venture I met while I was still in college. I'll tell my team now that I think we kind of run this risk. We know the old cliche and this platitude of the grass is greener, right? And we try to fight it. We say, I just got to be happy as a student, happy that I'm kind of poor, happy that I'm newly married, but we're still eating ramen, whatever your status is right now. We can kind of comprehend that. But I lost my train of thought. It was something good. Yes. And in the case of your startup, and especially when it comes to talent, take him a pair of socks, Case. That was great. He helped a brother out. And if you have questions, don't wait for me to pause, because I'm clearly not going to pause. Shoot up your hand and stop me as we're going through these.
Where is he?
Right up here. Guy in the maroon. What we find ourselves saying is, who do I need to meet? And here's what I believe. I believe to be a successful venture capitalist right now that I know everybody I need to know. Not to say I won't meet new people, but if I can just treat well and actually form and deepen relationships with the people I know today, that I will be successful. I try to live how I go about my day-to-day that way. I prioritize toward relationships I already know. Now, that doesn't mean I'm not interested in your business idea if you want to pitch me or our team, but the way to get to me is probably through somebody that I have a deep relationship with. I think that's the case in your startup. You have to kind of say, like, look, this isn't about going and recruiting the best dev talent in other parts of the world or the Bay Area. You happen to be in a place that's very dense with talent. You happen to be at a university. We didn't even try to do this, but I think all of the finalists in the startup competition that we recently judged all had genealogy back to BYU, or were currently at BYU. You know all the people today that you need to know. It's just a matter of sometimes like realizing that relationship in a class, and all of these relationships, I could go through one by one, every single one of these. What's interesting is these aren't only the people that you'll build with today, but these people have all gone on, and I just did this exercise of like, what are they all doing now? And interestingly, they're all starting companies that either I've invested in, actually every one that I've invested in, or that I'm closely involved with. ZibTech and Village is another VC. So don't take for granted what's right beside you, in your next class. The grass, it turns out, isn't greener on the other side in a lot of ways, especially with the human capital around you. Crazy founders and the teams around them. These two founders made me, give me the opportunity to continue what I do. Has anybody heard of Podium? I can't say enough for Podium. Hopefully that you have opportunities to hear them speak. They're just two of, they epitomize, and sure there's luck woven in, but they're just remarkable. And they have their streaks of crazy, and I love it. When I first met them, they had this tenacity of putting themselves through Dev Mountain so that they could build their own product, and they were selling their own product. And they told me after they raised money, I think we invested, our first check was $350,000. They're like, just in case we like fooled him into, writing a check, like let's make sure we stretch this money as far as we can. So at a day and age where people have raised millions and millions of dollars to accomplish something, Podium has done something just so amazing. I'm not at liberty to share the numbers that they're doing, but it's just growing like a rocket ship, and it's the first of its kind, fastest growing SaaS company in the history of our state, and like top 5 in the world. What may not be as obvious, this is them celebrating after a massive year and a milestone, is that what makes Podium great began with the right amount of just crazy and tenacity in Eric and Dennis. But what has allowed it to continue to be great and to reach levels now where we just hired our 450th employee is that you have team members, and the level of detail that they put on each new team member, the talent that they've been able to attract, has put them in a position to continue to do, what they love doing. Let me pause for a second. Any questions? Go ahead. Case, hook them up.
Yeah, how did you get that initial push to get out of the status quo? I think that's the hardest part for a lot of them.
Yeah. There's never a better time than now. I know that sounds cliche, but you're only going to, especially me knowing things about your life and the commitments that'll come to you and responsibilities, in church and family, because I've been through that. I went into marriage, and part of it was that we happened to grow up with some similar expectations and go into marriage with similar expectations. So I was married. That had a huge impact on it. So I would say, one, it's not your decision alone. But the other one is, we live in a time where it's not like you left your career to go do this and it's seen as a demerit if it fails. Like, I don't think that. I like to hire and see people hired who are coming off a failed startup, because I'm like, you've gone through something where you have like physically felt the challenge of something that you probably won't find as hard at now an established company or your next startup. So I don't know. I feel like the risk is as low as it's ever been. Like in terms of software available to start a startup, money available from folks like us or great firms like Kickstart and Pelion and Signal Peak. I mean, it's all around. I'm definitely drinking the Kool-Aid. But look, it doesn't mean after I wrote that letter I wasn't like, okay. I mean, I remember putting it on his desk at night and kind of waiting for his response. I needed a little validation from someone else. A co-founder is critical, absolutely critical. Knock on wood, I will never invest in a single founder. It's always got to be at least a co-founder, if not a couple. Because I know that you buttress each other when there's times where you're like ready to like wet yourself from fear. Go ahead, in the back.
This idea of conviction trumping all. There's a lot of companies who are very confident, but their confidence blinds them to the reality of their market or their revenue.
Yes, great question. Keep with it, but I think I know what I want to say. Keep going.
How do you avoid that? And how do you see that?
Yes, I love this question. It's like what's going on. I'm not going to tie it to the church. I'm sorry. You don't want me to do that. Here's what it is. You're at a time when there is a growing bonfire in Utah around tech, right? You probably could rattle off the top 5 names. Who are the tech kings right now? I don't know, they speak every other week. They introduce everybody on the stage, and they're great people, by the way. I'm not knocking them, but like, you probably know their names. You probably know the companies. You probably see the billboards. You can read the blogs. You can attend the seminars. And you're attending this, and hopefully it has a high level of authenticity. The challenge is the startups, precisely what you said. How do you not get lost in like this false conviction? I'll tell you how you're not. You're there like feeding the soup to the person that you're making soup for and seeing if they like the freaking soup. You've got to be so close to your customer and your product. That is what, if I were to say one thing with Podium, I'm talking about another piece of it, but they're product people. They are maniacal about product. And so what I was saying with the early wind-up is take the opportunity to go to the big conferences, but that is not the like tiniest, purest piece of startup. The purest piece is operate in a closed box. Like just you, your co-founder, and your customer, and like really understand it. Because if you can solve something beautifully for 1, and then 2, and then 10, like you start to have something interesting. That's what we do in our diligence at this early stage. I don't have the luxury of looking at like 5 years of financials. Okay, is this a good business? What is EBITDA going to look like? I have no idea. Who do I have to talk to? Customers. Are you using this? How would you feel if I took this away from you? And when you have a customer say, I would be ticked. My job would be in jeopardy. How would you feel if your company did with this? I'd go work for our competitor who has it. I'm like, oh, that's interesting. That's where you have something. So it is as simple as a very simple, it is like a finite relationship. You and your customer and the product that is the reason you have to engage with that person, period. Got any ladies who want to answer a question? Okay, come on. What you got?
Just like when somebody's like starting a company, you find it like hard for them to get super married to an idea and not want to change.
Say that again. Sorry.
If somebody's like starting a company,
Okay.
do they feel too married to the idea that they're not willing to change certain things?
Good question. This is so hard. So the question is, when somebody's starting a company, what if they get kind of too married to the idea that they're not willing to change? There is a fine balance. I wonder if my next slide talks to this. Nope, not yet. How much time do we have, just to make sure
20 more minutes.
Okay, cool. This is this balance, because on one hand, I could tell you the story of Degreed. In fact, we'll jump to it. I'm going to come back to my daughter in a minute, but we're going to jump. Yeah, there we go. There's Degreed. Oh, no, here's Degreed. There's some people from Degreed. So David Blake starts Degreed. And initially, he's like, I'm in a jailbreak of the degree. Like, if I ask Scott, tell me about your education, what is he probably going to say to me? And how long ago was that? Like 20 years. Like 20, 15, right? And if he asks me, I'm going to say the same thing. And yet, in the span since we graduated college to now, like, is that our education? That's like, I can't even remember. I'm telling you vignettes from like Econ 110, but I can't remember a single thing I learned there. Not that it's not important and has evolved and that I've retained some of it, but like this chunk of our education, we have no way to quantify it. Well, how do I quantify the last 15 years? There's no degree for like being a failed founder and then a successful founder and now a VC. Like, how do I quantify it? So Degreed was on this mission to jailbreak the degree to better allow us all to talk about and summarize and share our education. Okay, here you go. They're crushing it. David was maniacal about it, so much that I have like pictures of him with like a piece of cardboard standing outside. So like the Secretary of Education, he was like getting a picture with him and trying to just do anything he could to get somebody to buy into it. So on one hand, he would not let go of his mission. Before he let me invest in his company, and I'm like a friend, he worked with me at my last startup. Before he let me invest, he had me he shares with me the journey on a napkin. He's like, I'm going to share with you the same vision I share with every employee I hire, and he still does it. And then at the end of it, he goes, can you support this mission? And I go, yeah. He goes, can you please repeat, I can support this? And he made me repeat. I was like, Dave, it's me and you. This is weird. Why are you doing it? It mattered to him that much. At the same time, the business direct to consumer wasn't working, and so they made a major pivot where they said, who cares about quantifying education? I wonder if Tesla cares. I wonder if Caterpillar cares. I wonder if Bank of America cares. And it turns out all those care, and they're all our customers right now. Because someone like Tesla's like, we have a huge workforce. Do we want them to get smarter? Yes. Is information always changing and available? Yes. Like, how do we quantify it? So they went to this new role emerging in companies called CLOs, Chief Learning Officer, and they're like, hey, we have a way to quantify every bit of learning. Not just the, everything down to like the books your employees are reading, to a TED Talk they listen to, and yes, the professional seminars and certifications. We can quantify all of that. So I guess it's a little bit of both. You have to have something about what you're doing that is just like you feel it in your belly, it's visceral, and yet you have to say, what am I committed to? I'm committing to solving the problem. I'm not so committed to how that has to be solved, as long as it's ethical, legal, etc. Does that make sense? That's what I would say.
And not too fattening.
And not too fattening. Yeah.
Just back to your point about how founders are crazy, I feel like I know a lot of people that are crazy that don't end up doing anything. So I want to know, what are the attributes you look for in people that you're going to support? What attributes are like have to be there for you to back them, and what are some red flags that always keep you away?
Yeah. Attributes and red flags. Honesty is so high. So I will go and talk to people they worked for about what their business dealings were with that person. And what you want to find is when it was when the stakes were high, when they were kind of in the fire of a situation, when things didn't go to plan, when you have reason to be skeptical, when you have an opportunity to look out for number one, how did they respond to it? There's been a couple situations where, and it was painful, but an investment didn't happen because felt like there was a shortcut taken. And I wouldn't make a moral judgment on that person. It's hard running startup and life. And on one hand, I'm a Christian. I believe in forgiveness, you know. And so, again, no moral judgment. But as a fiduciary to my investors and with my own capital, like, I've got to feel like that's bulletproof. The second thing is if I like them. So there is something to, this is a long journey. You know, you find in other relationships, say your marriage, like, yes, it's like we have similar this and that and this, but like there's also just a piece of liking someone, and I find that's a real thing. So fortunately we have a team, 3 of us who invest. My partners John and Diogo, and we're all very different, our styles. You're going to get the big warm fuzzies from Diogo, you're going to get the kind of really clinical, more pace from John, and I'm somewhere in the middle, because we know that founders are all different, and we try to think of ourselves as like a little Lego piece that can hook on and be your little junior co-founder in a relationship. So that's how we think of it. Let me share a little bit here, and then a couple more questions. Did you get some socks? Casey, did you hook a brother up? Okay, nice. We're out of men's, only have women's socks. Okay, so only room for women to ask questions unless somebody gives it to their significant other or something. So I've shared a few things, and I just want to end with kind of taking, you're kind of like, you're probably still wondering a little bit, what exactly did they do and how did they grow? So we build this product that's kind of like a LinkedIn for high school students. We have single thousands and then tens of thousands, and with time hundreds of thousands of students using it. We're connecting them with universities. We have deep relationships with half of higher ed. And then we find an emerging opportunity in China. It turns out during this time, like around 2009, there were record numbers of Chinese. Any Chinese brothers or sisters in the house by chance? No? I'm bummed. And so we open an office, and I move with my family to China. And it's like a dream. I served my mission in Taiwan, so did my wife. Our oldest at the time was Case's older sister is going to go to kindergarten locally there. So we're like, we're going to be this family living in China. We moved right to the heart of China, lived on the 35th floor. And Micah was born to us. And Micah, when she was born, she looked just like that. This is like days old. And if you'll notice her beautiful little lip, it was like, okay, did she need a little more oxygen? What's going on? And it turns out Micah has a condition called lymphatic malformation, where she has cysts throughout her mouth, tongue, and neck. And we didn't know it yet, so we had to fly her home with Ryan when she was 8 days old. Getting a visa in like a matter of days was kind of tricky, but we get her out of Beijing. She's back here at Primary Children's, and I get this call. I'm back with Case and his older sister, Koi, in China. And I get this call saying she has to have an emergency tracheostomy. So it turns out that Micah, she didn't have enough room to breathe through her trachea, so this trach allows you to kind of bypass the tightness there. And so we're with our startup, things are finally going well. I'm in China, we had sold everything but the shell of our home. We sold our cars, we sold everything. And then it's just like everything just came to almost a screeching halt personally, where I'm walking Case and Koi to school every day. Case one day, we chose to live in the heart of the city. My office was an hour and a half by subway away. So I'm taking him to school. We have a nanny who only speaks Chinese. I get this call one day. Come here, Case. I get this call one day, and Case was 3 at the time. Come stand by me, brother. And Case had locked himself in the bathroom. And the nanny, the IE, couldn't speak to him in English, so she's trying to tell him how to lock himself out. So I'm an hour and a half away, and I'm like, it was so aggravating. So I get back down there and I help out, and it was a time for our family where it was like I was brought to my knees in every way. I remember one day, Case's older sister, it was like a tough morning. We're getting out the door, we're late, and we're walking down the hall, and I spank her, and I don't really spank my kids, and I kind of did it hard, and we get in the elevator, and she looks at me and she goes, "That's not how dads are supposed to treat their daughters." And I was just like, it was just a spear through my heart. And I was like, I'm failing. I'm straight up failing. We have not yet seen this company through. to where we need to take it. It seemed so magical, and yet it was like such a hard time. Thanks, brother. You can have a seat. Staying in the boat, staying the course, having conviction, and having great people around you. They're not just kind of good isms. They're like what save you, right? Or save your company, because what I realize in those moments is like, well, it's certainly not me that's going to take us across the finish line. It's going to be a team. These are the people, that were around me in our company at that time. And now so many of them have gone on to do, this is David Blake, who started Degreed, right? This is Mick, who's doing Mainframe with his bro right now. Lance is doing, Dan is the head of sales at Podium, right? These relationships, and those aren't the great things about them, that they've been successful and made some money. The great thing is that bond you form when life is just really real and really visceral, and you need somebody that's either a shoulder to cry on, that certainly happened, and just somebody who can kind of fill in and pinch hit at times where you're not able to do it all. I talked about Degreed. Last one. This is a recent investment in LA, and I love it. Baller TV is a cool company that provides live streaming for young athletes and their parents. Live streaming of games. So like you can watch all your kids' games now from your phone. It's rad. Dwayne Wade joined us as our brand ambassador and invested with us. And I spent a weekend with him in Vegas when we were filming some of what now is on our website, and we had an article with USA Today and Sports Illustrated. And what you may not know about D. Wade, and I can't profess to be like tight with D. Wade. I've taken some pictures with him. I got to know him a little bit, but I read, and I'm a huge fan. I love hoops. What you'll learn about D. Wade is he wasn't recruited heavily out of high school. What you'll learn is that he had a difficult time, with his first wife and her struggle, some of her personal struggles, and that was super hard on the family. Seeing him, in his final year and being able to have a small part in a startup together, seeing him with his son when we watched him cheering on his son shooting hoops, seeing him with his son, in the hotel room and just joking around, what you kind of realize is startup isn't some thing out there in the ether. Startup is just a microcosm or a piece of the same thing you're all experiencing now. We all need to stay in the boat, stay the course on our path, be ready to jump when the time is right, at the right opportunity. And it's not you're weak if you don't, you're tough if you do. It's different for us, all of us. You need a supporting cast of people around you to cheer you on in that effort. And good things can happen. I remember the day I was in a hotel room in Copenhagen at a conference when I got the call from Anne, who was our CEO. I'll be with her tomorrow night in San Francisco at the Battery, having some dinner. We got the call, and she's like, "We did it. We sold the company. Congrats." And she's very understated, and I'm like, "Well, thanks." And I kind of hang up the phone, and I just burst into tears because it was like this accumulation of emotion and all these little ups and downs and some of the stuff I shared with you. Such an honor to be with you guys. Please, if you can, join after. We'd love to talk some more. There is different aspects to what I do. I am a VC. I'm also a BYU grad. When I'm here, I'm here in the capacity as a BYU grad. I'm proud of this university, what you espouse, what we share in a shared faith. And if I can ever be helpful to you, don't hesitate to reach out. I'm the worst on LinkedIn. If I don't respond to you, don't hold me to it. I'm better in other ways. But thank you so much.